In the darkness of the night, the light of a light from a lighter flashed, and, along with the ignition of a cigar, a pungent smell appeared in the neighborhood. The pungent smell was mixed with the smell of blood. But one white-haired guy, who was already used to such a combination, didn't care. Thrusting the iron lighter into his pocket, he raised the muzzle of the pistol, and, releasing the smoke of cigars, fired. The bullet blew out the brains of some poor guy and he fell face first into the ground with splattered blood. The one who killed him was a white-haired man about 20-something years old. He was wearing a beautiful black tuxedo and a red tie that was very in harmony with his blood-red eyes. Raising his head, the guy saw a beautiful blue and full moon, grinning. Here she is a beauty, not like him. Releasing acrid smoke, he closed his eyes to complete the tragic picture. Haruto Hagami, that was his name, and his profession was not very noble, namely a murderer. For so many years, he has dreamed and talked about it more than once, but he still repeated his eternal words when he quit this dirty job. His smartphone vibrated, and the guy sighed, thinking that here is a new order, here is a new murder, an endless vicious circle. They don't even let him reflexive. He picked up his smartphone and saw his mission number 100. There it was said that he had penetrated into the Diablo forest and killed the chairman of the Phoenix Society, Kokuryu Kim. Surprisingly, for his long experience, the guy heard this name for the first time. But for a bounty hunter, or simply a killer, it is vital to know at least the rich of his country, because often they become orders or customers. But he didn't know this to Kokuryu Kim, although murder is murder, a trivial matter for him. But the next sentence scared him a little. This Kokuryu was the chairman of the Phoenix Society. A month passed after that incident, and here in one of the prisons of the country a prisoner with white hair and eyes as red as a roof was escorted by 3 guards to one of the cells. A guy in striped prison clothes sat down in a seashell-like chair, and the handcuffs were removed from his hands. And then he plunged into the game. 20XX year, after the law on the abolition of the death penalty came out, one game was invented to reduce the excess of prisoners. A merciless game where criminals were immersed and they endlessly fought with each other. Someone just to survive, someone to take power here, and someone just for fun. People were dying here all the time. Accidental death from a stray arrow was in the order of things here, and torture by fire was quite humane ways. It was a virtual world with full immersion, in which a game called Battle Royale took place. As mentioned earlier, the prisoners have only 2 goals here, to survive and to get away. And so RGG got to such a place and so far just analyzed, hiding behind a wall. There were a lot of madmen here. In what looked like a cave, men and women of all ages with daggers, swords, axes, and hammers attacked each other like wild animals and killed each other. For example, one yellow-haired man cut the hand of one poor guy with black hair. And here is another example of a madman. Some red-haired guy with a muscular build picked up a thin guy with black hair with 2 hands, squeezing his neck and laughing like crazy, saying that he really liked this game, because here he can decrease as many as he wants, such brats as this guy with foam in his mouth and his hands. But even over such madmen there were even stronger people. Someone of a strange appearance appeared behind the red-haired guy. Noticing this, the red-haired guy grinned and said that there were still fools ready to fight him. So far, no one has been able to stop it. But before the redhead could finish and turn around, his face split open, and his head fell to the ground above his mouth. Others, seeing this moment, looked at the culprit in shock, and in disbelief said that in an instant that redhead was laid down. Who in general is this? But no matter who he was, the important thing is that rivers of blood flew everywhere. The game had a very special feature, and it was called the Forest of Diablo. And it was special here because if they die in the game, they will die in reality. The one who lost everyone was an old man with a mysterious purple aura around. He was wearing clothes worn by exorcists in ancient China. Looking at the madness that this old man was doing, one of the prisoners, named Jennifer, who went to prison for fraud and received a sentence of 80 years, trembled in fear from horror. She decided to participate in this under the pretext that he would be released ahead of schedule. But seeing this monster, she understood that such a fate would not shine on him. Besides, she absolutely did not expect that there would be such a monster here. The old man turned his head in the direction of one prisoner who was running screaming from fear somewhere, and the old man decided to follow him, and Jennifer breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that she was lucky to escape. The girl thought that if she had known that this would happen, she would have preferred to live quietly in prison. While she was thinking about all this, some bespectacled man with black hair reaching to her neck closed her mouth, grabbed her from behind and cut her neck. Why do players who know that they can be killed agree to the game? Everything is very simple. The bespectacled man, looking at the already dead girl, laughed and said that she was distracted by the old man and stopped being on the alert. he'll take her glasses. In this game, there were points that could be obtained from the prisoners you killed. The points were equal to the term of the prisoner, and they could be used for money and items and even for a fixed term. It was the latter that became the reason why so many prisoners agreed to the game despite the risk. Laughing, the bespectacled man said that this is a really cool game, because here you can decrease as much as you like, and even for this the time is reduced. This guy's name was Nick, and for killing and getting rid of a corpse, he was initially given 180 years of time, but thanks to the game, now he had only 30 years of time left. Of course, the game was watched, and like now, the dead were reported. In the place where the woman was watching from the cameras over all the prisoners in the capsules, a mechanical voice was heard saying that player number F1314 Jennifer had died. Then a mechanical voice informed him that he was disconnecting. The girl in the surveillance room confirmed the termination of the player's vital signs. That's how the player knocked out of the game. When a player died in the game, in reality he died of a heart attack. Then the life ring was removed from him, and after getting rid of the deceased player, the ring was transferred to another prisoner. And so our white-haired friend also became one of the players. Feeling cold, the guy asked about why making the game so realistic. He was wearing a black hoodie and black trousers. The guy still couldn't believe that he had to take part in this game. But it was in order to get close to the goal, so he had no choice. Well, all this was not important yet. The most important thing for him now was survival. Finally, when he reached the end of the cave, he came out and saw the grave. It was a building in the style of ancient China or Japan. He immediately went into the tomb and saw a candle and grinned. Coming up to him with a jerk, he brought his cigarette to the fire, and feeling the acrid smoke in his mouth, he calmed down and let it out. And then he said that he did not think that, no matter what, he would have a cigarette, but there would be no fire to set it on fire. As we know, the guy's name was Hagami, and he was given a 500-year sentence for murder. After thinking a bit, he said a map or something like that, and a window appeared in front of him, and he exclaimed in surprise that it was pretty cool. Of course, he did not expect that the games had developed so much. While he was looking at the map, he heard the rumble of something and realized that something had moved. Looking towards the crypt, he saw that its lid had moved. There was a beautiful girl with red curly hair in the crypt, and the guy thought it was a corpse, and wondered if she was also a player. And then a new window appeared in front of him, telling him that there was a rest bead in the girl's mouth. Is it possible to take it away? That's what the guy asked himself, and stretched out his hand to the bead emitting a pink ore. But immediately his sixth sense told him that there was danger nearby. Non immediately ducked, thanks to which he survived the attack of that black-haired bespectacled man. He immediately jumped away from the bespectacled man waving his sword and asked what he was doing. A so-so greeting. The bespectacled man grinned, looking at him, asking if he is seriously going to complete missions and complete the game. Isn't it better to decrease and get points? The guy sucked in more smoke from the cigarette and released it with pleasure, said something about how he would pass the game. It was his own business. And I thought to myself that he wasn't a bit interested in collecting points by killing. Of course, his real target was the chairman of the Phoenix Society, Kokuryu Kimu. The Phoenix Society is Asia's largest underground organization. It is believed that half of the Earth's resources are in her hands. Using the acquired, they receive income from bets on the Forest of Diablo. The guy found out that if he passed the game, he would be able to meet him, which is why he ended up here. The bespectacled man, chuckling madly, smiled and asked what the guy's term was. The guy, after taking another drag, exhaled and thinking, said that he did not remember. It seemed to be 500 years. The bespectacled man looked at him with his mouth wide open and asked why he was sitting down at all. The guy, grinning, said that for a lot of things. While Haruto was grinning and taking a drag, the bespectacled man did not believe in his luck, because for 1 year of the term, he gets 10,000 points, and if he kills this guy, he will get as many as 5 million points. He'll suddenly get rich. Laughing madly, he shouted that he would not only rescue himself, but also get the money, then he would not be up to that killer. The guy raised one eyebrow and asked him if he should talk about the killer who was behind the bespectacled man. The bespectacled man, not understanding, asked what he was talking about, as a hand pierced his stomach and blood poured everywhere. The bespectacled man stared in disbelief at the hand that came straight out of his stomach, not believing it. And Haruto calmly told him that he stopped being on the alert when he chatted incessantly. Behind the bespectacled man was that old man with a white beard, almost deathly pale skin and red eyes. Looking at this semblance of a monster, Haruto thought to himself that, and the characters of this game are quite scary. The monster threw the bespectacled man and Haruto with his hands in his pockets, raising his leg to repel the bespectacled man who was thrown at him by the monster. Throwing away the bespectacled man, he said that he no longer needed him. But he took the katana of the bespectacled man and waved it towards that old man, saying that he would not let himself die here. He was surprised to notice that not a single cut appeared on the old man. He swung his sword a few more times hitting this monster, but not a scratch appeared on it. He did not react at all. And finally the monster waved its paws and the guy was thrown into the street. The guy, looking at the opponent, began to think tensely. If this is a game character, then surely there must be a way to defeat him. And then he remembered the bead that he did not have time to take. Perhaps she was the answer to the task. The monster rushed to him with claws on the edge and the guy also ran swiftly in his direction and a couple of steps away from him ducked and leaning on the old man's head made a U-turn, and then a somersault on top of the old man. In this way, he reached the crypt in an instant and landing with his hands next to the dead man in the crypt. He took the ball with his lips and pushing off from the crypt made a U-turn and landed on his feet. And while the monster was rapidly walking towards him, a dead man rose from the crypt. The girl with red hair screamed and pierced the old man's pile, and when the old man screamed and opened his mouth, the guy spat in his direction and the ball hit him right in the open mouth, which caused him to freeze and the guy, rapidly approaching, cut off his head. Then he looked at the girl with red hair and thought that if she had become an opponent, then Haruto would have fallen into the trap. But it looks like this beauty was helping the players. Well, the game is over. He looked at the window with expectation and realized that nothing was passed. He immediately turned around, sensing danger, but did not have time, because the beauty waved her claws and a hand flew up. Not believing it, he looked at the hand flying into the sky with shock. The guy with the tension immediately turned around and managed to get up and cover himself with that bespectacled man as a shield. The monster swung its claws and an arm flew up, from which blood sprayed in all directions. The smell of blood hit the guy's nose, but he was not up to it. He looked at the moving girl with shock and recoiled, shouted about why the game was not over. He still defeated the boss. The guy threw aside the corpse of the bespectacled man and shouted to the girl to stop. But she with blood-red eyes did not even listen to him. The girl with a jerk headed in his direction, and the guy was asking about what was going on here. His performance was watched from the screen by someone sitting almost on a royal chair. This one, someone laughed nastily and said that the guy got caught. Next to the chair there was a girl in a scientist's robe and her friend. This someone asked if they could pass the guy any object. Vanessa, a scientist in a white coat, black blouse and black skirt, said that although the speaker was the chairman, even he could not interfere in the game. At this time, the girl herself was looking through her glasses at the tablet and doing something. A beautiful woman with black hair and a pipe seemed to be sitting on the chair, but she wasn't talking. Someone else told Vanessa that she was doing well and that her character was what he liked. At this time, there was an uproar in the audience seats of Diablo. Those who watched Haruto dodge Kangshi's punches shouted that this guy was incredible. Not those who bet that he would win, but some, on the contrary, on his loss. The guy himself, now dodging, was thinking that it looks like this girl is the true boss of the game. Deciding that he didn't have time to think, he raised his katana and took a stance and made a sharp lunge, asking for forgiveness from the beautiful Jiangxi. But when colliding with her body, the katana broke in half, and the guy looked at the handle with the rest of the katana in shock. He immediately crouched down, dodging Jiangxi's punch and jumped back. At this time, everyone in the hall was excited. One clutching his head asked him not to lose, and the other shouted so that he could do it. And the third just asked if the guy was okay. The guy at that time saw the head of that old man and remembered that the bead was in his mouth, and it was unlikely that he would have time to get it and use it before it was cut in half. Therefore, deciding that this was a lost cause, he turned and ran towards the cave, deciding to run away first. Of course, the girl began to chase him. At this time the guy was thinking how to defeat this monster. Ordinary weapons can't hurt her, but then an idea came into his head and he grinned. Looking back, he walked in the direction he had noticed earlier. At this time, in the chairman's wide room, that voice from the chair said that there was no point in running, because Jiangxi was chasing to the last. But the scientist with short blue hair looked at the screen in silence. Finally finding the way, the guy saw the gap and ran in that direction, passing through the gap. Turning around, he bent down on the girl who had just entered. Whoever she was, she must have at least some weak spot. With such thoughts, the guy hit the rest of the sword in her forehead. But the rest of the sword broke, and nothing happened to the girl, well, except that she was even more enraged. Clicking, the guy wanted to jump away, but the girl hit him and he flew away. By the way, the room they entered was divided in the center by lava, and there was only a rope bridge between the two sides. The guy was pushed to the other side of the bridge, and after doing a somersault in the sky, he grinned and told the girl to get ready, because now she will take a lava bath. No matter how invulnerable she is, she definitely won't be able to handle the lava. While the girl landed on the rope bridge, the guy cut the ropes of the bridge and the girl fell right into the lava. Looking down from above, the guy grinned as he watched Jiangxi burn up in lava. After that, the game notification came that the boss was defeated and the guy had seen the items. Sighing, the guy said that it was scary. At this time, the audience of all this was divided into two loggers. The first one was having fun and shouting because he won the jackpot, and the second logger grabbed his head and screamed out of frustration because they turned into bankrupts. In the chairman's room, the chairman himself said in surprise that he did not think there was such a way to win the game. The guy at the end, when the world started disappearing, heard that he got 1,000,000 points for completing the mission. Then the system notified him that if he wanted to shorten the deadline, he could exchange points in the lobby, and that's how he got out of the game. He opened his eyes already in the seashell chair and moving his brush said that it looked like there really was a connection with reality. The Phoenix Society used satellites to broadcast the game and thus she profited from betting underground. At this time, in the Phoenix office, someone regretfully said that he had died. Someone else asked about the results, and the first one said that he had lost money because of Nick. In the office on the desktop, where there were cigars and a can of whiskey, a laptop was opened in front of the man, in which the players were depicted. The dead were crossed out with a cross, and the survivors were simply shown. Someone said, someone who complained about losing, that he simply underestimated the dark horse. And the man who was sitting in the chair next to the table said that this time everything was a little different. The criminal who killed Dr. Yamagishi, who developed the virtual space technology, and his family, passed the game with the help of missions. He was the first to complete all the missions of the game so quickly. At this time, in the chairman's room, the chairman of the game pointed out that this kid was not bad. Hagami, I think his name was, he really exceeded the chairman's expectations. At this time, the guy on the screen pulled up saying that he was tired, and the chairman, looking at him, said that he should not be overlooked. Vanessa, a scientist with short blue hair, asked the chairman if he was sure that this guy had committed the crimes for which he was imprisoned. The chairman said that he didn't care whether he actually committed these crimes or not, the main thing for him was the show. If it continues to be choking, then he is satisfied. The chairman looked like an old, little granny with thousands of wrinkles and stupidly painted purple eyes and lips. There were drug tubes sticking out of his nose, and he was wearing a school uniform of some school. This granny was sitting on the lap of a beautiful girl with black silky hair and black eyes. The girl was smoking a pipe and did not pay attention to this old junk, although she supported him so that he would not fall. This man looked more like a zombie than a human being. He said that he needed to entertain this Hagami later, and in the meantime he turned to the girl on whose lap he was sitting and said that he was hungry. Vanessa looked away, not having the slightest desire to look at this horror. At this time, the guy was sitting in a seashell chair, and he received a notification that the next game would start soon and therefore the guy should choose the items he wants to take with him. Leaning back in his chair, the guy said in surprise that it looked like the next game came faster than he expected. Well, last time he had nothing to light a cigarette with, so this time he chose cigarettes and a lighter. The system reported that his choice was confirmed and his bracelet lit up, and the guy felt that he got into the game. But immediately he felt that there was not enough oxygen. With surprise, he looked around and found that he was inside the water, maybe the sea. He saw a shark in front of him, and the shark also saw him, and therefore, with its jaws wide open, attacked him. He barely managed to dodge, but the shark managed to cling to his hood. The shark began to pull him further without letting go. The guy didn't know where he was being dragged, but he knew that he didn't have enough oxygen. His eyes rolled back from lack of air, and he began to lose consciousness. This moment was very similar to his moment from the past. Then he was drowning in the water too, and if she hadn't come to help, he would have died. He needed someone right now to save him, but then the realization hit his head, and he came to his senses. Now is not the time to sleep, because this time no one will save him. When he came to himself, he turned around and hit the shark right in the eye. And this moment was broadcast on the screens in Diablo, and many viewers screamed in delight at such a turn. The guy himself did not stop at one blow, because now no one else will help him. After killing the shark, Hagami was able to swim to the top. Sighing, he said that it looked like he was very unlucky, because even before the start of the game he found himself underwater and almost dropped his skates before the start of the game. Then he remembered about his cigarettes and lighter and looked at them with a dumb look. The cigarettes got wet and the lighter didn't turn on. It looks like he took them for nothing, it's even a pity. And then he looked around and saw long trees above him, although he was now stuck in the water. At that moment, a window with a task appeared in front of him, where it was said that the condition for completing the mission was to receive the treasure of the mermaids. Below was the difficulty level, which denoted the D rank, and then came the number of players and how many of them remained in the game. By the way, their number was 124 out of 145. Seeing the task, the guy wondered if it was necessary to get the treasure of the mermaids or steal it, and then noticed that 21 people had already died, and the game had just begun. While he was thinking about all this, someone in armor similar to an astronaut's spacesuit, and a sword of the Middle Ages swam out from under the water behind him. He wanted to swing at the guy, but Hagami reacted in time and turned around when he saw that a shark jumped out from under the water and devoured that cosmonaut warrior. Surprised to see a shark, the guy thought that it looked like another shark, not the one he had recently visited. The shark dived back under the water, and the guy, realizing that the shark was not alone, immediately began to move towards one of the trees, because he could easily die here if he was eaten like that astronaut. Clinging to the base of the tree, he began to climb up, and reaching one of the branches, he looked at the water, asking about how many of these creatures are here. After a couple of seconds, I noticed that one shark with many knife wounds was lying on its side in the water and swam out. Looking closer, he realized that this was the same shark that had recently attacked that warrior. Something lit up near the shark, and a bluish beam like a spider web shot right under the armpit of the guy. The surprised guy dodged the web that clung to the tree, and then he saw something flying towards him with a sword rolled with a red aura. In the helmet of that cosmonaut, he saw his reflection and managed to do an upward flip and dodge the attack, then landed on another branch, while that warrior dressed in similar clothes to a motorcyclist landed on a tree, half of which he cut. Hagami looked at this war uncomprehendingly and asked him if he had not been eaten, but in response he heard an unrelated answer to the question. That guy said that Hagami Haruto is not simple. The wary guy asked how he knew him, and the motorcyclist, putting the sword in the inventory and shooting a web in the other direction, said that in prison you can watch battles without participation, and they bet quite a lot on the guy. Then, after flying away, he finally threw that he had a conversation, so he called the guy. The guy thought that this stranger had hidden a weapon, and he didn't seem to be hostile, so Hagami still decided to go with him and see where he would take him. He landed on the roof of a treehouse and asked a stranger where he got the ability to shoot cobwebs, saying that it was very convenient. The stranger said that it was a spider web reward that he received for defeating the boss. The stranger also told the guy that he had defeated the boss, so he probably has one too. Then the stranger looked at the guy and asked him if anyone had explained to him, no matter what. The guy, grinning, said that he did not read the instructions. Besides, he was too lazy, so he skipped everything. Well, Hagami was sure that he wouldn't die so easily. The stranger, taking off his helmet, said that she thought so, looking at his questions. She had already seen people like Hagami who died without understanding anything. It's better to be careful and not risk it here once again than to die without understanding anything. The stranger took off his helmet, and under it was a beauty with scarlet hair and green cunning eyes. Grinning, she introduced herself as Mia and said that she was pleased to meet the Hagami. The guy, surprised by this turn, stupidly watched as the girl took off her bulletproof vest, because of which Hagami thought that she was a girl. The girl said that because of the sharks, this protection became unusable, and asked the guy if he would reimburse it with glasses and remove the protection in the inventory. The guy asked her if it was possible to pass glasses to each other, and the girl, grinning, went further along the bridge between one treehouse and another treehouse, at one beginning to explain to the guy the importance of glasses, of course, first reproaching the fact that he does not know anything. Points were the currency in this game. For them you can buy items, equipment, and arrange transactions between players. Finally, she cautioned Hagami, telling him not to use all the glasses before he got out. The guy asked with interest why he didn't use his glasses while following the girl who was climbing the stairs at the end of the wooden bridge. The girl, turning her head, looked down at the guy and said that there are rules that if a player has 0 points, then after 10 minutes he will be forced to decrease. The girl advised Hagami to remember this rule, because it is very important. The guy grinned and thanked her for the warning. They finally reached the hut, and the girl sat down at one of the tables, and the guy asked her how much she was in this game, since she knew so much about her. The girl, pouring herself tea, said that she had been here for the 2nd year, and then asked if the guy would have tea. But the guy refused, and therefore the girl, lifting the shoulders of the deputy, began to drink. Then, after taking a sip, she said that if you eat in these recreation areas, then in reality you can satisfy your hunger. So even if a player stays in this game forever, he will not die. Well, if others don't kill the player, of course. Then the guy suddenly felt something and saw a shadow on the ground behind the girl, although there was no one and nothing there. The guy wanted to warn Mia, but he was too late. Someone grabbed her and pricked something in her neck. The guy opened his eyes wide from this because a second ago there was no one there, and now some guy who looked like a madman grabbed Mia and pricked something to her. It was Katani Shiro, who received 130 years from murder and rape. He was a man with short brown hair, a square forehead and crazy eyes. He smiled broadly when he said that he had finally caught Mia, and then said that she would finally become his property. The girl looked at this guy with disgust and a little fear in her eyes and asked how he got behind her. The man kissed the girl's face, said it was a chameleon skill. The girl, feeling disgusted by the actions of this guy, told him to stop, but he did not even listen, and continuing said that he spent too much effort to get her. The guy, looking at this disgusting sight, told this madman to stop and let her go. Shiro, looking at the guy, asked who he was, and suddenly something came into his head and he looked with shock at the tormented Mia, and asked if this guy was his lover. He asked her with shock why she did it while he was away. At this time, enraged by Hagami, he told him to let Mia go, otherwise he would kill him. Raising one eyebrow, the madman said that he seemed to have heard this name somewhere, and suddenly his pupils narrowed when he remembered who he was. Laughing madly, Shiro asked the guy if he wasn't the one with a 500-year term. He shouted that he did not expect to meet such a celebrity, because everyone is looking for him. The guy, frowning, asked why he was them, and Shiro, looking at him like a fool, asked if he was an idiot. If you kill a guy, you can get 5 million points. I mean, he's just a gold mine. The guy asked, looking at this madman, wouldn't it be better to aim at him? Shiro licked his lips with distraught eyes and said that he didn't need any glasses if he had Mia. Hagami became even more gloomy because of Shiro's words, and Shiro told him that he was going to have fun with a girl, so Hagami should not interfere. Putting a knife to Mia's back, Shiro said that if the guy gets close, Mia will die because of him. The guy, grinning, asked if this guy was threatening him, and at that moment her eyes glittered, and she grabbed Shiro's hand with a knife while he looked at her with shock. Hagami did not miss this chance and with a jerk moved towards Shiro and said with a grin that he seemed to have lost his vigilance. Shiro was perplexed to think that Hagami was too fast and got punched in the face and flew into the water below them. A shark jumped in from the water and devoured Shiro. Hagami, holding the girl, asked if she was okay, and yes, nodding, said that the guy should leave here faster, because it's no longer safe here, other players will come soon. The guy grinned and said he couldn't, and then asked her how he could use the skills. The girl told him to just say the name of the skill and the skill to appear. While the two were talking, 3 more people appeared nearby. One in green clothes, looked like a European. The other muscular, but with a bulging belly and also black, looked like an African. He had a fox's head and a thick beard, and he was dressed in a blue t-shirt and white knee-length shorts. The third one looked like an Asian, but more like a rat. He had white hair and wore dark blue clothes. The black-bearded man, seeing the guy, said that it looked like Hagami. The one in green clothes said that if he was gone, they would get 5 million should they try. Then the third guy, who looked like a rat, said that if they get so many points, they can become hunting targets themselves. The guy, pushing the girl away, told her to rest, and he himself would deal with these named guests. The guy, seeing that they were still talking, asked if they had talked, and the guy with the rat face said that they would attack in a bunch. Even if they shared the reward, it would be enough for everyone. The black one said that everyone would figure it out after they killed this guy, and the other 2 agreed with him, and all 3 shouted that they would show the Hagami the strength of the 3 brothers. The rat-like one shot towards the guy, and the other 2 ran towards him. The one in green clothes began to pull out a katana, and the black-bearded man clenched his fists. Dodging the arrow, the guy uttered the boss skill and a window with zombie claws appeared in front of him. The guy stuck his hands in the window and they began to turn into hands with huge zombie claws. Seeing this, the guy in green, who was running ahead, got scared, and Hagami, looking at his hand, grinned, saying that it was something. Raising his hand, which turned into the paws of a monster with a slightly purple skin tone and huge claws, the guy, grinning, said that skills are cool. The guy in green and the big guy with the beard didn't wait any longer and both rushed at him at once. A guy in green from the top, and a big guy with a beard from the bottom. The guy, grinning, grabbed the blade of the guy in green with his hand and exclaimed in surprise that it was pretty cool. After his words, he noticed a blow coming from below and immediately threw the guy in green with a sword and put a block. Despite the block, the momentum from the blow pushed the guy back, and he flew over the railing. At this time, the archer on the roof of the house ran towards the guy, and Nick's sword landed in the hand of the bully. Hagami flew towards the tree and, pushing off from it, flew towards the archer who was standing on the roof. The guy grinned, told Tom not to sweat, and continued to load the bow, while he concentrated on the zombie hand. Having accumulated strength in him, the guy with a red glint in his eyes said that it looked like the archer would be the first to test the strength of the zombie hands. An archer should consider it an honor. Grinning at his thoughts, Hagami waved his hand and 5 blades flew from his claws towards the archer. Hagami looked at his trick with surprise, while the archer barely managed to jump up, which is why none of the blades hit him. But they hit the trees not far away and they fell into the ground. The guy mentally said that this game is really impressive, because he can do things here that he never dreamed of in reality. The archer jumped away from the felled trees and was replaced by a swordsman who appeared in front of the hags. With rage, the guy in green swung his katana, shouting that he would deal with the Hagami. But Hagami raised his paw and easily deflected the blade blow. While the swordsman was recovering and taking a pose, Hagami bent up, dodging a blow from behind with his fist and leaning on the fist of a big guy with a beard, raised his legs towards the swordsman, saying that they would not catch him off guard so easily. The legs were imprinted into the muzzle of the swordsman, and using this blow as an impulse, the guy pushed off from the swordsman's face and flew towards the big guy with a beard, with claws at the ready. With a wave of his hand, the guy ripped open the bully's swollen stomach and he began to fall on his back, spitting blood. Seeing this, the archer shouted the name of the guy. While the archer was shouting, a message appeared in front of Hagami, which informed him that for killing the player, number M987, Bob Rodriguez, Hagami received 400,000 points. The guy looked at the dead man in surprise, but someone called him and he turned around and saw a swordsman with a bloody nose put his sword to Mia's throat and began threatening with Hagami, saying that if he moved, he would kill the girl. Seeing this, the guy realized that now these 3 were aiming at Mia. Seeing the stupor of the guy, the archer praised his friend, the swordsman, and said that he would avenge Bob. But at that moment he looked in surprise at the big guy with a beard who had risen from the dead, and shouted that Bob was alive. But Hagami, who was closest to Bob, saw that the guy had clicks, and it was dead from him. Grinning, the guy said that now it would be easier. The surprised swordsman also looked at the living guy and asked if he was really alive, but he just started to descend from the roof without saying anything. At this time, Hagami grinned and said that he would tell them something interesting. It looks like this zombie arm wasn't just killing players. The swordsman asked in perplexity what Hagami was talking about, as at that time a huge shadow appeared behind him. And while the swordsman was looking at Hagami, the black bully smeared his head into bloody pieces. When the swordsman died, Hagami again heard a voice telling him that the M986 player John Rodriguez was killed by the zombie Hagami, thanks to which the guy received 320,000 points. The guy nodded and said that it looks like even if a zombie kills a player, points will still be awarded to him. The archer, seeing this, became enraged, not believing in his eyes, and ran away with a jerk. Mia opened her eyes, because she constantly heard her name, and when she woke up, she saw a guy with hair as white as snow and eyes as red as blood. It was Hagami. He, seeing that she had woken up, said that he had been waiting for a long time. The girl, getting out of bed, thanked him, saying that he had saved him, and then saw a black bully with completely white eyes without pupils and claw marks in his stomach. Frightened, she immediately took out her sword and cautiously pointed it towards Bob, asking Hagami why he was still alive. The guy told the girl to calm down, because Bob was no longer an enemy. He even patted the big guy on the shoulder and said that he didn't do anything without orders. The surprised girl asked what it was, and the guy activated his ability, and grinned seeing how his hand turns black and his claws lengthen. Coughing dryly, he told the girl that this guy had become his faithful minion, thanks to the zombie hand. No matter what he orders, Bob will do it. The girl doubtfully asked that Bob was really a zombie. The guy nodded and, taking the big guy out of the house, said that for now let him guard them, and they rest. The girl admiringly said that this is really a cool skill. Mia's glory was repeated in the chairman's office, who was watching the fight. The chairman, who caused only disgust, lay in the arms of a black-haired girl, whom he called Mom, and ate green grapes. He looked at his subordination and told her that no matter how much he looked at this Hagami, it didn't bore him. Didn't Vanessa feel the same? A girl with short blue hair the color of the sky nodded and said that at this rate, Hagami can pass this game. The chairman nodded and said that well, they should move on to the next event. While the girl was taking a shower, the sign on her back in the form of a red sword immersed in a red ring and eagle feathers on both sides could be seen, because Mia told Hagami not to peek. Hagami did not understandingly look at the curtain hiding the girl who was taking a shower, and said that he did not understand women. In such an environment, she decided to go to the shower. Why this is necessary is not clear, because it's still a game, and there's no point in washing. Sighing, the guy heard the rumbling of his stomach. As all these events unfold, he seems to be hungry. It's amazing that he wants to eat in the game too. The guy told the big guy that he was going to eat, and Bob had to look after Mia. Going into a kitchen-like room, the guy complained about whether there was anything to eat and soon found a box filled to the top with peaches. Then he found other ingredients and decided to make soup. After a couple of minutes, the soup was ready, and after tasting it, he sadly thought that after all, the soup does not come out as delicious as hers. While he was drowning in his thoughts, he heard Mia's voice saying that she was surprised that he could cook. Turning his head, the guy grinned and said that he was rather surprised that he wanted to eat in the game, and then asked if she would. Leaning on the door frame, the girl said that she would, and then said that she was putting it to him, but she had an important conversation with him. The two sat down at a table that stood in the same kitchen, and when the girl tried it, she looked surprised. But a spoon. The guy asked her how it was, and the girl was still in a stupor, said it was delicious. Then she continued to eat the soup and asked the guy if he happened to be a cook. The guy shook his head and said that it was just his hobby, and then looking at her, asked her what kind of conversation. The girl asked the guy if he wanted to copy. Then the girl added that in the last game, Hagami did not kill the players, passed the missions and collected points. She also noticed that the guy has some other goal besides being released from prison. Grinning, the guy looked the girl straight in the eyes and thought that she was pretty smart, but despite this, she hardly knows that he needs to leave the chairman. Whoever she is, no one should know about Hagami's real purpose. The guy nodded and said that everything was clear to him now. It seems that the girl trusts him more than other mission performers. In addition, I cooperate, they will be able to earn points faster and achieve their goals. The girl, leaning forward, leaned on her hand and smiling, said that let the goal be to get her out as soon as possible. That was enough for her. This is quite a good deal. The guy said that it was possible, of course, but grinning and looking down, he said that he still needed the courage to unite with a woman with a tattoo on her back. Mia immediately flashed red and asked how he found out, and then the guy's hearing caught something. The girl stuttered and asked how he saw her, but the guy did not answer and concentrated on hearing, and when the girl wanted to yell at him, he grabbed her by the mouth and said whose was silent, didn't she hear anything? The girl looked at the guy in surprise while he was still listening. The barely audible sounds were like a song. Turning around, the guy looked in the direction of the sound, to where a beautiful mermaid sat under the moonlight with a harp on her hand and sang. Beautiful, infecting music sounded. Everyone who heard her could not remain indifferent. Whether on the island or in the trees, everyone got up, hearing the melody, and hurried to its source. That's how one group consisting of 3 people who were resting around the fire heard this sound. One of them asked what these sounds were and stood up. The other followed his example, as did the third, and said that the sound did not sound like a scream. It rather looked like a woman's voice. Several groups followed the voice and ended up by the sea. There they saw a beautiful golden-haired girl with a fin playing a huge harp. The sound of the melody played by her small but deft fingers on the harp strings was mesmerizing and bewitching. Next to the mermaid with yellow hair sat several other mermaids already with green hair. They were sitting and listening to music. All the beauties are all infecting. The men who saw them couldn't take their eyes off and said only that they were cute or beautiful. The mermaids noticed the men and turned in their direction, widely tore off 2 sides of the fins, making legs out of them. Seeing this, the men did not remain indifferent. They screamed as if bewitched, saying that the mermaids had legs, and began to run towards the mermaids directly into the water. Everyone went towards the free mermaid, and the mermaids didn't mind being embraced by them. Hagami, who saw all this, wondered what they were doing, and Mia said with disgust that it was an abomination. The melody of the beauty with the harp still sounded, and bewitched by this melody, people clung to the mermaids, and suddenly they threw themselves into the sea, holding the guys tightly in their arms. Everyone became a victim of the mermaid and began to drown, and the beauty with golden hair continued to play her huge harp while men were drowning around her. Of course, Hagami saw it all, and he didn't understand what was going on here. Was there something in the depths? One of the mermaids got close to Hagami and opened her arms wide, told the guy to go to him. Something clicked in the guy's head and he got up from his seat. Nia, who saw this, looked at the guy with surprise and asked what happened, but Hagami did not answer anything, or rather could not answer. He mentally screamed that his body did not obey him, and he could not say anything, and then looking at the mermaid, he decided that it was because of them. While he was walking towards the mermaid, Mia shouted to him from behind the bushes to come back, and the guy realized from this that this does not work on Mia. That is, these mermaids can only control men. Then he noticed a mermaid with a harp. She sat there for a long time, and she didn't attack anything, just played the harp. And then the guy realized that everything could be because of her song, because it was when he heard her singing. Then his body stopped listening. Mia, seeing that Hagami did not react to him in any way, put on a helmet and decided to go out. And the guy mentally apologized to her and said that no one else could help here. The guy just mentally asked the girl to notice the real opponent. But the girl chose a mermaid who lured Hagami and stabbed him with a sword, and realizing this, Hagami mentally slapped himself on the forehead. She should have been aiming not at this mermaid, but at that one in the distance. The sword pierced through the mermaid and came out with the end from behind. But because of this, now Mia couldn't get a sword, and the mermaid didn't even think about dying. She just approached her, pushing the sword even more inside, and when Mia realized that the mermaid didn't care, it was already too late. The mermaid hit her right in the helmet and pushed her into the distance. The girl's helmet broke, and she herself crashed into the sand. Mia asked in surprise how the mermaid could break her helmet, but of course no one answered. The guy of course understood that things were bad, because the wound from the girl's attack had already healed, which means she can't cope with this monster. The guy mentally shouted to Mia to run, but of course no one was a telepath and could not read his thoughts. The girl shot a spider web and said that it looks like nothing else but at a distance will not come out. Rising towards the ocean, the girl passed over the guy's head and screamed at him to wake up faster. And the guy could only mentally shout that she did not go there. Soon one of the mermaids jumped out of the water and grabbed the girl, and then dragged her down. The guy could only curse fate, but then a thought came to his mind when he looked at his zombie hand. He mentally summoned his minion. He, like a shadow, turned out to be behind a mermaid with a harp and hit the place where the mermaid was, but she managed to dive into the water. When the melody ended, Hagami happily realized that he could control his body. He immediately swam inside the water and soon saw how the mermaids were controlled by a huge fish-like monster. There was a branch on the monster's forehead that was severed and fastened on the mermaid's back. The monster had huge sharp teeth with which it devoured victims that it had caught not long ago. The guy started looking for Mia with his eyes, but two mermaids immediately swam in his direction, and one dragged Mia towards the monster, and the mermaid who was dragging Mia went inside the monster's mouth. The guy, seeing this picture, used his skill and with hatred in his eyes sent the claws of blades in all directions and cut all the mermaids who attacked him walking along the branch on the monster's head. He began to look for Mia, who disappeared and soon saw a bump on the monster's head. There was definitely something moving. While he was examining this place, the fin of the monster went in his direction and hit him like a beardless life, a beardless ball. The guy flew down while blood oozed from his head and mouth, but clenching his teeth and enduring pain, he swam towards the monster's head. Tearing the place of that bump, he saw Mia captured. The girl, seeing the rescue, smiled, and the guy, grinning, took the same hand and dragged it up. Soon they floated out and sighed. The guy asked Mia if she was okay. The girl, sighing, smiled and nodded, thanking the guy. But at that moment a shark with its mouth wide open swam out from under the water. The shark, of course, was behind the girl, and the guy, seeing this, could only shout her name. Seeing the shark's wide open mouth, the guy immediately grabbed Mia and began to swim in the opposite direction from the shark, and then immediately turned and swam to the shore. And when they finally reached the shore, both breathed a sigh of relief. The girl asked in shock how the sharks got there, and the guy, sighing, said that a little more and they would be the end. How many sharks were there at all? The girl started looking in the system for how many sharks and seemed that there were only 4, and the guy, looking in surprise towards the sea, told the girl to turn around. Surrounded by 4 shark fins, a mermaid with golden hair and red eyes looked at them smiling. The guy, seeing her, said that the monster seemed to be still alive. The girl also said that it looks like it's not an ordinary monster, maybe the boss here. The mermaid hissed and the sharks moved towards Hagami and Mia. Seeing this, the girl screamed that this creature was swimming here, and it looked like she was controlling the sharks. The guy asked her, a little uncertainly, that she should not go after them at the moment. The shark was swimming towards the shore, not even thinking to stop, and then the water began to decrease and the shark began to approach the shore. And instead of a shark, a huge humanoid with a shark's head and a very muscular body came out of there. Seeing this, the guy's eyes went out of their orbits in surprise, and the girl screamed in shock that this creature's legs had grown. The shark, seeing them with a jerk, headed in their direction, raising a fist with 3 fingers. The girl, using a web, dodged, and the guy just jumped aside and the shark hit the sand, which caused grains of sand to fly everywhere. Before Mia could fly, another shark grabbed her leg and threw her towards the stone. The girl screamed in pain, clutching her shoulder, and the shark rushed in her direction. Seeing this, the guy asked the girl if she was okay and mentally ordered the zombie to protect Mia. A big guy with a beard jumped out of nowhere and smashed his fist into the shark's jaw. Although the shark's head turned from the impulse, but seeing the victim, he immediately turned his head and bit the zombie's hand. Immediately, on the other side, another shark appeared and bit the big guy with a beard on the head. Seeing this, the mermaid with bloody eyes giggled, and the guy saw that the remaining hand was bitten by another shark and all at once turned up their mouths, because of which they tore Bob into pieces. Seeing this, the guy turned pale in shock, and then he felt the danger and saw the last shark behind him. All four began to approach him, and the guy, grinning, said that these sharks are pretty smart since they use the divide and conquer strategy. Then, grinning, he applied the skill and said that they were just what he needed for a warm-up. He'll kill them all at once. One of the sharks struck in his direction, but the guy easily bent over from the blow and, concentrating on the zombie arm energy with a wave, cut the shark's arm. Immediately after that, he jerkily rushed to the opposite shark and with his claws inserted his hand into the monster's stomach. Having pierced all the organs, he immediately turned around and swung his claws with all his might towards the third shark, which rushed in his direction. However, the shark finally managed to hit the guy right in the stomach and he felt a lot of pain. The sharks were strong, and it felt like they knew martial arts techniques, and they also had great teamwork. If he loses his vigilance, he will die. While the guy was falling on the sand, the second fist of the shark rushed in his direction. The fist of the shark crashing into the sand made the grains of sand fly in all directions. But when the dust settled, the guy was not in the place of impact. Raising his head, the shark saw him above him and the guy, using the momentum of the fall, cut the shark's belly. She fell to the ground to her death. And then, the guy felt that his body was not controlled by him again. At this time, right behind him, a mermaid was playing a harp. Gritting his teeth, the guy said that it was not at the right time. But this time he was sure that the mermaid would not come out like last time. At this time, the chairman said that this is the end of the guy. At this time, he was drinking a cocktail, and said that he did not think that this guy, having reached here, would lose. He expected a lot more from him. But at this time, the guy himself was thinking about something else. He tried to take control of the sharks, and he managed. The sharks with green eyes stood up, and the chairman, seeing this, laughed, saying that the guy made zombies out of these fish. The chairman did not even think that such a thing was possible. At this time, all four sharks rushed towards the mermaid, who, seeing this, turned her hair into tentacles and shot them at the sharks. The tentacles wrapped around, pierced and tore the sharks apart. Blood gushed from the sky like rain, and the mermaid in intoxication raised her head and began to drink drops of blood. The guy, having freed himself from the shackles, thought that the mermaid seemed not only to be able to sing, but it still wouldn't hurt him. While the mermaid was enjoying the bloody carnage, the guy rushed in her direction and aiming directly at the mermaid's neck swung his claws. But the mermaid managed to duck at the last moment, which is why the guy's claws tore the tentacles on her head, not her throat. The guy looked at the dodging mermaid in surprise, saying that he missed. At the same time, one of the surviving tentacles grabbed the guy by the throat, and the guy cursed his luck for not being able to cut down all the tentacles. But despite the capture, the guy's hand was still free and shouting. He waved it, but the mermaid managed to grab his hand as well. Feeling that he was dying, the guy mentally said that things were bad, and mentally asked for help. But at the call of his help, the ocean swayed and the huge monster that controlled the other mermaids came out from under it. Seeing his boyfriend in shock, mentally shouted that this monster was still missing. Hagami looked towards the huge monster. It was impossible to see him well in the water, but now he completely swam out. It was a huge fish, half of the body of which was the head, and 2/3 of the head was a huge toothy mouth. A little above his yellow eyes there was a branch that divided into several parts, at the end of which there were mermaids, although now only the trunk remains of them. And then with a growl, the mouth of this monster opened wide behind the mermaid. But she managed to jump aside, which is why the monster did not get her. Seeing this, the guy thought that this monster wanted to eat a mermaid, and wondered if these two were not partners. At this time, in the stands, people were shouting at the top of their lungs. Someone shouted for Hagami to win, and someone on the contrary shouted for him to die faster. Even the chairman shouted, asking what was going on there at all. Vanessa, seeing him like this, told him to calm down. If he screams like that, his blood pressure will rise. Clutching his head, the chairman said that he had not really seen such players, whom he would be so interested in watching, so this guy should not die. After all, he will become the chairman's precious toy. At this time, the guy was fighting for his life thinking about that monster. Apparently, he became a zombie when Hagami was saving Mia. If that's the case, then Hagami immediately ordered the mermaids to attack this crazy woman who was squeezing his throat. Looking at the crazy eyes of the mermaid with tentacles instead of hair, he mentally screamed that she would still pay him for everything. Immediately after his order, half-dead mermaids emerged from the water without a pupil in their eyes and clung to a mermaid with tentacles instead of hair. The zombie mermaids had no arms below the elbow, no legs below the shin. Why, they even had their brains on display, but they still clung with their inhuman teeth to the shoulders and head of the enemy. Seeing this, the guy grinned, saying that this skill is like a cheat. Grabbing the tentacles on his neck with his freed hand, the guy apologized for having captured the mermaid's friends. But for some reason the mermaid laughed and was not in despair. The guy didn't even have time to think about why the mermaid would laugh in such a situation, as she screamed at the top of her voice, releasing sound waves. The guy who was opposite her grabbed all the energy of the sound. The eardrums of his ears exploded, and his eyes almost burst, and bled like a fountain. The incredible scream was still ringing in his deafened ears. Whether it was an illusion from the brain or the remnants of sound, Hagami did not know, but he knew that it hurt like hell. The sound wave of the mermaid not only hooked the guy, but also the monster and Mia, who was a few dozen meters away from him, and even the hall where the bidding was. One of the screens even cracked, and the audience, clutching their ears, fell down, shouting about what was happening. It appeared on the screens as Hagami goes from all the cracks, shelter, and he himself falls right to the mermaid, the demon of consciousness. Of course, what he saw disappointed many, and many witnesses began to shout for him to come to his senses, because if he dies, their money will burn out. Of course, there were also those who encouraged the mermaid to finish off the Hagami. The mermaid finally stopped screaming and sighed, as the guy's hand immediately slammed his mouth shut. From all the cracks on the guy's face, the roof was a trickle, but the guy, not paying attention, with difficulty, said that the sudden cry of the mermaid really enraged him. The mermaid, even with her mouth closed, began to release sound waves, but the guy shouted for her to shut up and pushed her into the wide open mouth of the monster behind the mermaid. The monster devoured the mermaid, but along with her and the guy's hand. There wasn't much left of the monster after that scream either. Half of the monster disappeared, and one of the eyes fell out of the sockets altogether. But that didn't stop the monster from devouring the mermaid. Feeling a burning pain in his arm and aching pain all over his body, the guy breathed a sigh of relief, saying that he was finally done with her. But at that moment, the mermaid's head came out of the cracks between the monster's teeth, and she screamed again and used her sound wave. But this time the guy looked at her from above and pointed to her ear, said that he could no longer hear. Then he gathered the energy in the zombie hand and said goodbye to the mermaid, dividing her head into pieces. After that, the mermaid melted, and a bracelet appeared at the place of her death, and seeing this bracelet, the guy said that it looked like a mermaid treasure that was needed for the task. As soon as he picked it up, the mechanical voice of the system rang in his head, informing him that the game was over and player number M9527 Haruto Hagami received 1,000,000 points for the extraction of the mermaid treasure. Then another notification came, which informed that the mission was completed and the player would be automatically disabled. Before losing consciousness, the guy looked in Mia's direction, and seeing that she was fine, he closed his eyes and began to disappear into the system light, thinking that he had not been so hurt by others for a long time. With the notification that the game was over, the guy woke up in a seashell chair. Surprised that he had returned and not died, he looked at the hand that was in place, and his ears heard normally, although the ringing in them remained. Stretching his neck, the guy thought that it looks like the loss of a body part in the game does not affect reality in any way. Grinning, he said that then next time he could take a little risk, but if he dies, then it's a bummer. After a little thought, he decided to be more careful next time. At that time, a shadow of a man appeared outside the door, and seeing that Hagami was alive, he shouted loudly that the number M9527 was alive, and there were no deviations in it. And then turning to the guy, he told him to have Hagami put his hands behind his head and get out of the booth. While Hagami acted as he was told and left, he began to hear other officers shouting the same thing as his accompanying jailer shouted. By the way, the jailers were dressed in the standard blue uniform of police officers. Hearing that most of the numbers died, the guy thought that others were probably unlucky. After finishing the list of prisoners, the officer shouted that the survivors should go to the field with the officer, and that they should move faster and not lower their hands, or else shoot. Going out along the corridor of the prison, the guy found himself in a fairly large area for a prison. Here, prisoners were taken out from everywhere and put in a row. The guy, also standing in a row, looked in the direction where the gate stood and noticed Mia there in standard prison striped clothes. Seeing her, the guy's soul became easier, but then he noticed another girl with short red hair in the same clothes of a prisoner. He looked at her in shock and then heard an enraged voice telling him not to look in Mia's direction. Turning around, Hagami saw an ugly guy with short black hair and a broad forehead. The guy's eyes were like a maniac, small pupils and thick lips. Annoying appearance, in short. He was also wearing striped clothes, so he was also a prisoner. Although it seemed to Hagami that he had seen this guy somewhere, but it was probably just his imagination. Enraged, Fat Lip told him not to let Hagami think that everything was allowed to him, just because he had completed a D-rank mission. He even promised that he would definitely kill Hagami. Mia, seeing this maniac, asked in surprise that this guy had not died yet. And Hagami, turning around, looked doubtfully at the fat-lipped man and scratching his head, asked who he was. From such impudence, the veins on the forehead of the thick-lipped swelled, and he shouted that Katani. Hagami threw him into the sea. Did the guy really not remember him? After thinking a little, Hagami nodded, said that he remembered, this is the same pervert, and then asked how he survived. He was kind of eaten by a shark. Katani screamed that he was not a pervert and said that he almost died because of Hagami. After he was attacked by sharks, he hid in one of the trees until the end of the game, shouting that it was like hell. Because it hurt like hell, Katani said that Hagami couldn't even imagine it. Then an officer noticed them and shouted at them to stop swearing and quickly get into line. Katani, smiling, raised his hand with a green bracelet and asked the officer if he could fight. The officer, nodding, stretched out his hand. There was a watch with a screen on the officer's hand, and when Katani brought his bracelet to him, it lit up. Then the officer, looking at him, smiled and told him to make it as colorful as possible. Smiling, Katani promised that it would not be boring. Then, turning to Hagami, he said, smiling broadly, that if you have glasses here, you can do whatever your heart desires. You can buy your rights as much as you want. Taking the pose of a fat-lipped smiling, he said that Hagami got here with the help of a skill in the game. But what will he do here? Because Katani is stronger than Hagami. With these words, Talstagub ran to Hagami with a ready fist. Hagami easily dodged the blow while thinking about his own. Mia and the other girls from behind the gate also witnessed this drag, and Mia looked at the guy with concern. But at that moment he was thinking that this really was a prison. It looks like there's some kind of festival here. Then he remembered the red-haired girl he had seen. She was very similar to the one who saved Hagami as a child. True, she died a long time ago. At that moment Thick-Lipped swung his leg, but the guy easily dodged the blow and thought further. Even if she's alive, she couldn't be here. While he was thinking, Katani struck blow after blow, but Hagami walked away from all the blows, which enraged Thick-Lipped. Seeing this, the other prisoners looked at Hagami with admiration, saying that he dodged all the blows. And finally, Katani's blow reached the guy and he smiled, asking how the blow was, but was shocked when he saw that the guy just grabbed his hand. With a gloomy face, Hagami said that this guy fucked him up. Katani, smiling with a cold sweat, said why would he say that? Because Katani is still more experienced than Hagami. Therefore, when talking to Senpai, you need to speak politely. After shouting these words, Katani took something like a stabbing knife from his bosom and stabbed him in the direction of Hagami. But he easily repulsed the blow and took the weapon. This of course shocked Katani, but Hagami did not stop there and with the help of his own weapon sent a blow straight into Katani's eye, but stopped at the very end. Seeing this, even Mia turned pale. In the prison field, surrounded by many prisoners, there was a fight between Hagami and Katani, and in the end Hagami stopped the stabbing weapon right in front of the thick-lipped eye. The latter, seeing this with a tremor in his voice, began to beg Hagami not to do this. Hagami, with a gloomy face, told the guy not to piss because his death costs nothing. Looking at him, Hagami thought that there was no point in killing someone without a goal, but then he added in a voice that everything could change if Katani let go of Mia. The girls who heard these words looked at Mia, asking her if he was her boyfriend. Katani, retreating, agreed, and then the jailer shouted that it was forbidden to bring weapons here, so he had to give them back. The guy, looking in the direction of the girls, was still thinking about that redhead. She still worried him. He wanted to know if he was imagining it or not. Looking gloomily in that direction, with his scarlet eyes, he thought that he would not be able to get to her, because she was in the women's part. Then when he saw Mia, he nodded to himself and said that he would ask Mia later. At this time, a voice sounded from the megaphones on the pole, informing them that lunch would be coming soon, so the prisoners should come to the dining room on time. Hagami went to the canteen, but the prices there shocked him. The steak cost 2,000 points, and the bread cost 500 points. Seeing this, the guy asked with disbelief if 500 points were too expensive for one bread. At this time, a voice was heard behind him, explaining to him that if you have glasses here, you can do anything. He seemed to have said it once. Turning around, the guy saw that fat-lipped man. Looking at him, Hagami sighed, saying that he had come to him again. His life does not teach him anything. Frightened, Katani raised his hands and waved them in protest, at the same time saying that he just wanted to be useful to him. Then he asked Hagami that he had come to lunch. If he wanted to have lunch together, Katani could even pay. Standing in front of the vending machine, the guy refused, saying that he could buy his own food, so let Katani fail. Katani did not leave and continued, saying that he could buy anything for him, and also said that there was entertainment here besides food. Having selected food from the vending machine, he went to the side where the food was being prepared and at the same time asked Katani what kind of entertainment was here. Katani, thinking that Hagami was caught, immediately started talking about entertainment. He said that there are a lot of different things here that I can't even believe that this is a prison. Isn't it cool? Katani said himself thinking about all this, while he himself colorfully began to describe each of the entertainments. Despite the fact that this is a prison, you can ski here in real mountain conditions, or relax in a hot spring with the sky open, or enjoy a great massage with a professional, or just drink a glass of whiskey in front of the bar. Katani himself suddenly wanted to go there because of his own described, but Hagami just took the bread and said that he didn't care. And then Katani used his last trump card, namely skills. He said that you can even buy them here. For example, he himself bought a chameleon for glasses. This interested the guy, and he looked at the fat-lipped one. But at that moment someone asked him if he was Hagami, the novice who had already completed 2 missions. Turning around, the guy saw the one who was talking. He was a muscular guy with a puffy belly and short brown hair. There were several other guys sitting next to him. One was red-haired, almost fox-like, with a scar near his left eye, and behind that fat man sat a guy with narrow eyes and upturned black hair. Even further away, there were 3 more, one completely fox, the other on the contrary had shoulder length, black hair, and the third had short red hair. Katani immediately informed the guy that this group has been teasing everyone lately, reacting to them. You can run into trouble, so it's better to ignore them. The guy, listening to Katani, thought, and at that moment the one with the scar near his eye began to approach him. With swearing in his pockets, approaching Hagami, he said in a rude tone to the guy how dare he behave like that while talking to him, the bro of this guy with a scar. By the way, all these guys had a thuggish disposition and appearance, and therefore striped clothes suited them very well. Hagami looked at this guy with a scar from top to bottom and he went berserk, shouted at the guy, asking what he was looking at and asked him what he needed to be beaten so that he understood, and immediately sent his fist towards Hagami. But before the fist even got close to him, Hagami's hats reached the red-haired guy with scar and slammed him into the floor. All the others from this gang immediately went berserk and shouted that the guy was fucked, and Katani, seeing this, quietly slipped away from that place. At that moment, the officer shouted at them, asking what they were doing, because disassembly here, except for points, is prohibited. But no one wanted to listen to the officer. The main one, with a belly, approached the guy. But before he even raised his fist, the guy's fist smashed into his nose and threw him away with a bloody nose. Their boss did not fall, thanks to the fact that others caught it, but this action angered them even more, and a few more came from nowhere. One bespectacled guy with slicked back brown hair, another just looking guy with dark brown hair, another fox and another with a menacing look. One of them shouted that he would fill Hagami's face, ran at him and hit him in the direction of Hagami, but he easily dodged and hit back in the stomach, which caused the attacker to fall unconscious. At this time, another, very muscular guy ran at him, and he ran across the tables and the guy who grinned hit him right in the feet, which caused him to fall to the ground with a U-turn. True, he also touched the chairs, which caused them to break, but the one who was falling was not unconscious yet. Then the guy quickly approached him and, raising his fist, hit him right in the face and he flew back. Another one ran at him, but he grabbed this one by the head and hit him in the face with his knee. At that moment, the officer shouted that the number was M9576. He was finishing. Otherwise he would pay for everything broken with points. The guy stopped hitting everyone and looked around. Not 1 or 2 chairs broke here, but bruised losers lay next to the furniture. Other prisoners looked at this mess with shock on their faces and asked what kind of monster he was, since he had killed so many alone. The guy himself sighed and thought that he had a little temper. What was he doing at all? Where was his composure? Then he called thick-lipped, but hearing nothing in response, he shouted for him to answer and he came forward in fright, saying that his name was Katani. Thinking that it was necessary to be less visible in the future, he asked Katani if there was anywhere to smoke here. Katani immediately replied that there was, and so they came to a special place where they could smoke, although it was almost no different from other places in the prison. Well, there were 2 vending machines in which there were packs of cigarettes and lighters. Looking at the price, the guy said that 2,000 points for a paska, too much. This is pure Naturalovka. Grinning at Katani, he said that it was specially made so that it would not be so easy to get out. While saying this, he put his hand with the bracelet in the sensor of the vending machine and bought cigarettes. Exhaling acrid smoke, the guy felt that his strained nerves were calming down. He hasn't smoked for a long time, it's just a pleasure. Katani was surprised to ask that Hagami also smoke, but the guy, without answering, instead asked a counter question, asking how many Katani are here, because apparently he knows a lot about this place. Katani thoughtfully replied that it was probably 3 years. At the beginning his term was 100 years. And now he has grown to 130. The guy breathed out another portion of smoke in surprise and asked why it increased. It seems that the term is reduced here, and not vice versa. Grinning, Katani also let out smoke and said that it was true. But if you use glasses to reduce the term. But if you kill in reality, then the prisoner's term will increase. If, for example, Hagami would have lost a thick-lipped, then the entire term of the thick-lipped would have passed to Hagami. Then the boy asked with incomprehension, if Katani would have lost him, then the opposite would not have happened. The term of Katani would not have increased. Katani exhaled another portion of smoke, nodded, but said that he did not need to steam. The guy, not understanding, asked why it was, didn't Fat-Lipped want to get free from here? To the surprise of the guy, Katani said he didn't want it. Looking at the ceiling, Katani said that no one from the outside needs such scum as them. Moreover, if you have glasses, you can eat whatever you want and also have fun with the girls. And there is also a rumor that if you accumulate points, you can be sent to an even cooler place. Chuckling, Hagami said that it was really better to stay here than to go outside and get into the prasak. Katani nodded and said that it was true, there was no point in getting free. Therefore, he and some of the prisoners do not worry about the murders at all. The guy said that everything was clear to him now, but he thought to himself that wasn't this prison irresponsible? Are they even going to re-educate prisoners? After they smoked, they were called to their cells. When they came to the rooms, the officers told them to stand in a line of 2 opposite the rooms. Having called the guy by the number, he identified him in one room. At this time, Katani immediately approached that officer, and, paying him with glasses, told him to distribute it with this guy. The officer, grinning, asked about what kind of place it would be for the morning, but Katani said no, now they are allies. The officer, grinning, said that he could do whatever he wanted. While Hagami was entering the room, he heard someone start shouting that he did not want to enter this room. The officer asked him why, and he pointed to a huge guy burning in fat inside the room, said that if he got hungry, he would eat him. Katani, seeing that Hagami was interested, he said that this guy's name is Black Hole, and he's a cannibal. The officer said there were no more available seats, but there was a VIP room. Clenching his fist, the guy agreed and went to the VIP room. Katani explained that a VIP room costs 200,000, but compared to life it is not enough. At this time, the next in line in the room, a guy named Narumi, who had a sentence of only 10 years for damage to national property, approached the officer. The officer asked him if he wanted to go to the VIP room, but the guy said he didn't have any money, and therefore went into this room. Katani, looking at him, said that this newcomer was a corpse, but Hagami did not agree with him, but without saying anything, he went to his room. At night he thought that it was dangerous only in the game, but it seems that in reality there are dangers everywhere. He wondered what the female prisoners were like, if the redhead was okay.